Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's just jump right in. What if the entire global financial system, the one we all use every single day, wasn't just flawed, but was actually considered a literal declaration of war against God? That's a huge claim, right? Well, today we're breaking down a sermon that argues exactly that.
So the source material we're looking at doesn't pull any punches. It makes this absolutely stunning claim right from the get-go. It says there's one specific financial practice that is so profoundly wrong that Scripture describes it not just as a sin, but as an actual open declaration of war against the divine. I mean, wow.
All right, so what is this act? What's this big declaration of war? The whole argument centers on this one concept, sood. Now, that's an Arabic term for something we all deal with pretty much daily. Interest. Yep, we're talking about the fee charged on any loan, whether it's your credit card, your car loan, or your mortgage.
Okay, so let's get into the first part, a war on God. And the sermon is crystal clear on this. It argues that this isn't just any sin. Nope, it's the most severe one of all. Which brings us to our next section, the system of interest. I mean, you gotta wonder, how did we get here? How did this become the basis of everything? Well, the source material lays out a very specific history of how modern finance came to be.
Okay, to really get what the sermon is arguing, you have to think about money in two completely different ways. On one hand, you've got money with intrinsic value. Think of a gold coin, right? It's valuable because it's made of gold. But then you have fiat currency. That's the cash in your wallet. The paper itself is basically worthless. Its value comes entirely from a government's promise that it's worth something. And according to the sermon, this shift from real, tangible value to just a promise, that's the root of the whole problem.
And the source points to a very specific chain of events. It all starts with the invention of paper money. At first, they tried to give it credibility by tying it to a fixed amount of gold. But the real game changer, the moment everything shifted according to this sermon, was 1971. That's the year the U.S. completely cut the dollar's last high to gold. And just like that, the promise-based global system we live in today was born.
Now, another huge turning point that the sermon brings up is the Bretton Woods Agreement. This is what gave us global institutions like the IMF. But here's the kicker. It essentially forced the entire world to trade using paper currency. Suddenly, countries couldn't settle their accounts with each other using actual physical gold anymore. They were all locked into this system of, promissory notes.
All right, so after laying out the whole problem, the sermon pivots to what it sees as the solution. And this is where it gets really interesting. We move to Section 3, an economy of charity. It's a pretty radical alternative, a system built entirely on giving, not on creating debt.
And you can see here just how stark the contrast is. On one side, you have our current system of lending that makes a profit from people being in debt. On the other side, you have a system based on giving, specifically designed to wipe out poverty. And then the source drops this bombshell. In this alternative model, there are no government taxes. At all. They're completely forbidden.
So let's talk numbers. How much would it actually cost to solve global poverty? The sermon brings up an estimate. It would take about $318 billion a year to end extreme poverty across the globe. Just hang on to that number for a second.
Okay, you got that $318 billion number? Now look at this. The sermon then compares that need to the potential of its proposed solution. It estimates that zakat, that's the obligatory charity in Islam, could generate up to $1 trillion every single year. That's more than 3 times what's needed to end extreme poverty. The money, it argues, is already there.
And this idea goes even deeper. Let's move on to Section 4, wealth belongs to all. Because this alternative model isn't just about individual charity. It completely rethinks who owns a nation's most valuable resources.
So the sermon puts forward this really radical principle of ownership. It says there are 3 key resources that cannot be privately owned. They have to be communal. We're talking about water, pasture land, and fire. Now, here's the crucial part. Fire is interpreted to mean all our modern energy sources. Oil, gas, minerals, you name it. According to this view, all of that belongs to everybody, not to a corporation or a government.
And this ties right back into that whole no taxes thing we talked about. The logic is, if that natural wealth already belongs to the people, then a government can only charge for the cost of getting it out of the ground. Any profit it makes on top of that, say a big tax on oil revenue, is considered, illegitimate.
Okay, let's look at the final section. A return to gold? This is where the sermon looks ahead and it makes a pretty bold prediction about the future. The inevitable collapse of the entire financial system we know today.
And this isn't just some economic forecast, The source actually grounds this prediction in religious prophecy. It points to a specific tradition that foretells a time when our paper money system will just become worthless, and it'll force everyone to go back to using real, tangible things for business, like gold and silver.
And to back this up, the sermon points to what's happening in the world right now. You can see it in the headlines. It highlights how major powers like China, Russia, and India are buying up and hoarding physical gold at an incredible rate. The argument is that they're getting ready for the exact collapse that this prophecy describes.
So this whole sermon leaves us with a pretty heavy final thought, doesn't it? It paints a picture of our entire financial system as something that isn't just flawed or broken, but is fundamentally corrupt and on a collision course with failure. And it makes you wonder. It poses this huge question. If this entire system really is destined to fail, what would a world without interest even look like? What would take its place?